Meteor needs a foundation? Really? Well, we're going to explore that today. What does it mean, Meteor needs a foundation? What does it mean when we talk about this idea of a foundation? We're going to cover that. We're going to cover why we think there needs to be some other governance structure rather than a commercial one today. And we'll lay out the case as to why that will help assure the future of MeteorJS. This is episode 61, and you're watching This Week in MeteorJS, a weekly newscast of the MeteorJS Dispatches podcast. My name is Alim Gafar, streaming to you live from New York City.
Hello everybody, I'm Dvorak, aka Storyteller, coming to you live this time from Sendai in Miyagi Prefecture in Japan.
Hey, and this is Küster coming to you live as usually from Germany.
I have to say, Küster, it looks like you're trying to hide from the rest of us. Is there any way that you can elevate yourself?
The topic is too hot, man.
It's too hot to handle. Right. So anyway, as we normally do, we head right into the news. Jan?
Yes. So today I'm starting with the news. The results are in state of CSS 2024, and it's really, really eye-opening for someone like me who is not usually into CSS that I have to reread what's currently going on because there has been so much in terms of changes and updates in CSS in the last 2 years. That's crazy. And I mean, when you're working with libraries like Tailwind regularly, then you might keep up with the pace, but there are actually things I've never heard of. And this is something everyone who wants to stay updated, even if they're not super CSS focused, it's worth a read, definitely. So keep in mind that and check that out. This is interesting for everyone, and it shows the direction where things are heading. Just one little teaser. It's getting better. Actually, it's really getting better. It's not getting worse. This is cool. Okay, so coming from that into something we covered in our program a few weeks ago, and that's the follow-up article on our multi-mobile apps episode. And I've written an article and published it for Meteor Software about transform any MeteorJS app to PWA in 2024. So if you want to do that on your own, this is the written version of it, and it's not taking much of a time. It's like done in 5 to 10 minutes, and it's also full of some resources for further reading. Keep that out, check that out, keep reading, and let us know, let me know, especially if there's anything that bothers you, or if you liked it, of course. And if you like this episode, or if you like our program in general, then please hit the like button to let YouTube know that this is good content. And from here, I'm passing over to Jan, who will come up with the Meteor news.
Yes, time for the weekly Meteor news. So first of all, Meteor was at the Open Source Summit in Japan on Tuesday in the morning of the Japanese time. I had a talk about the history of Meteor and what can we learn from it to make other communities more resilient. Had, I would say, fairly filled room, much more than expected. I think in total, like 2/3 of the rooms were filled. So when it came to the end of it, so I think the audience also increased a lot of stuff. And also I did my personal review of the entire conference. There's also some more information coming. And also when I was there, one of the final things was announcing our drive for the foundation. The video of the talk will be available eventually from the Linux Foundation, so keep an eye out on that. Now to the development news. M7 S Jobs, or Steve Jobs, version 5 has been released. This is the version that works with Meteor 3. It's work for me Harry Adele and a few other awesome guys. So that one is out and ready for you to use. So if you rely on this package, that's one less thing that you need to kind of have forked locally. That said, we have Meteor 3.1 development going forward, and we have some exciting mergers in that part, specifically Node 22.11, which, besides all the other previous versions of Node 22, brings on itself OpenSSL version 3. So that'll be something to explore together with some other exciting addition that Node 22 brings, and of course, speed improvements. The next exciting and a must, I would say, for anybody who does a bit more advanced stuff or wants to upgrade to the latest MongoDB 8 is the upgrade to Node driver version 6. There is, say, a breaking change internally that Node driver version 5 stopped using callback, then moved to promises. So there has been quite a few changes. So definitely check out the pull request, and there will be, if any breaking changes is in that aspect, will be noted. But hopefully there should not be anything like that. But once the initial beta comes out, be sure to give this a try, because those are quite a big important changes to the, say, drivers of Meteor behind the scenes. So you will always want to kind of check that out early with your application, so that you can provide feedback if something is not working. And in this case, if it is not working for you, it's probably not working for 100 other people. So you need to let the developers know, because there's a lot of diversity in Meteor application, and it's very difficult to cover all the use cases. So that's it for the news.
Pretty awesome. And so this week, well, first of all, I just want to say we're at 306 subscribers now, which is awesome. We're trying to get to 500. We're trying to make it into the partner program. So for those of you guys who are still watching, haven't made the commitment yet, could you just hit that subscribe button? You'll get notifications when we have a new episode coming up, and you'll also help drive us to a little more independence, and it makes us feel appreciated. So thank you for everybody that's hit that button before. You can't hit it again a second time. But for those of you who haven't done so yet, if you could hit that button and get us forward, let's just try to get to, let's say, 310 subscribers by next week. I think that'll be awesome. So we're just talking about 4 more subscribers at this point. But if we can get past that, my stretch goal would be like 315. And that would be pretty awesome. But whatever you guys do, just hit that button and help us get to that number. Okay, and with that, we're going to get right into our featured segment. Now, we don't have a clear, what do we call that? Understanding Meteor segment this week. So we're going to wrap this as an Understanding Meteor element. We're gonna let the Meteor software folks sponsor this. Although, you know what? Actually, let's not do that, because it would give the impression that they are 100% on board with what we're going to talk about next. And I don't want to create a false impression. We are having conversations about this. And so let's just leave the Understanding Meteor section out this week. So I've said that now all in real time. You've heard me thinking out loud, which is a little embarrassing. But let's go forward with this anyway. So some of you might have heard about this letter that was written 2 years ago, and kind of has made the rounds. And some of you have read it, and many of you have signed it. But what is this thing? Well, almost 3 years ago, Storyteller and I and others had been having some conversations about the future of Meteor and what we could trust and where it was going to go. We were excited that Philippe had come in, and we had started seeing iterations in the 1 series, going from 1.7, 1.8, whatever, all the way up to 2, and then getting into 2. And we saw this velocity of change in Meteor that we hadn't seen before when Tiny took over. But it wasn't really clear why Tiny took over and what the end game was. And then after we wrote this letter, Philippe left. And it was sudden, and it wasn't something that was well communicated at the time. And a few weeks later, we got some information that Fred took over. And now Fred's been with the company for a few years as a CEO. He had been the CTO before that. And because of this kind of uncertainty, it made us even more committed to this idea that we needed to have some other governance structure. I will tell you that we sat down and we wrote this letter together in, I think it was March of 2022. When we authored it in March of 2022, as I said before, Felipe was still the CEO, and then changes happened and we held off on it. And then when Fred came in, we had a conversation about this. I believe we shared it with him. Jan, is that right? I think we did.
Yes, we shared it with him and Meteor Software in general.
That's right.
But we gave them some time to get situated before
exactly
dumping them on him.
So what we had done in the meantime was we solicited some of the more prominent people in the community and some of the big companies that were using Meteor to get on board and give us their feedback. And in the case of that, we got a bit of feedback. We tailored the letter a little bit, and then we got signatures on it. And I think if you want to scroll through that letter, you'll see some of the signatures at the bottom of it. We are going to make this a public letter now, a couple of years later, and you can all read it. We're going to publish it on the forum, a link to the letter. And if you would like to put your signature to it, we'd be happy to have you do so. Okay, so that's that's sort of the background on this. Now, what came, why did we write this letter in the first place? I'll tell you that I had a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Ry Walker. And for those of you who go way back, Ry had a company. He was with Meteor. He was with Meteor as a vendor or as a consultant selling services for Meteor with a company called Differential. And Differential in its day was a very big services organization that used Meteor as one of the tools for building applications. And he then went on to build a company called Astronomer. And in the course of building Astronomer, which is now very data-centric, I think the original iteration of Astronomer was built with Meteor. And it's it's a pass for data scientists, a platform as a service for data scientists. And then he left Astronomer. And while leaving Astronomer, he wrote down his thoughts about open source software. I read this. I had a call with him. We chatted for a bit about Meteor, about open source software, and so on. And that gave some of the basis for the reasoning behind the letter. And so we're going to be talking about some of that reasoning today. We're going to be talking about why we think that Meteor needs a governance structure that isn't necessarily tied to the caretakers of it today. We're not putting anybody down. I think the folks over at Meteor Software have done a really great job getting us to 3.0. And one of the reasons that we're talking about this today is because Meteor is now on solid footing, right? We've gone past the point where we're no longer behind the curveball in terms of being on par with the latest node version. 3.0 has taken us from the old model to now the new async 08 model. I forgot for a minute what I was going to say there. And so now that we're there, now that we're on a more solid ground and we don't have to worry about, can we play, can we compete? I think now we can actually think about the future. We've taken care of the basics. that are fundamental for us to be able to continue as a project. And now we need to start thinking about how do we inspire confidence and and allow companies and people that are building their businesses on Meteor to know that Meteor will be around with fixes, improvements, and new features in the years to come. All right. So how do we want to go through this list of stuff here, guys?
I'll start with the kind of the first thing that we have here, which I think one thing also to consider what kind of changed the situation a bit recently is that Tiny, the owner of Meteor Software, went public, which introduces a bit of a wild card because public companies have the, should I say it diplomatically, reputation of prioritizing short-term goals, short-term profits over what could potentially be long-term benefits, because long-term benefits does mean that you have to tighten your belt, which kind of brings us back to what I've covered in my history of Meteor, the uncertainty of what's going to come next, because any open source project, when you just look at the spreadsheet, will be in red, will be from the perspectives of chief financial officer, a black hole that that just you put money and eventually hopefully the money comes back in some other ways, but on the spreadsheet itself it will just be like something that you just put in money. So that will be a prime thing to pivot from, which is what happened with Meteor Development Group. They found something that was more profitable, so they pivoted to that over Meteor. So that's an issue that needs to be, and therefore kind of having an independent governments or say organization solely focus on the open source part and nothing else is to benefit, and we have many examples in the wild where that works, starting from the top with Linux and Apache foundations to all even the smaller ones. And with that, with having also, and this is something that came back when Node.js was owned by a commercial company, there was also constantly the question, okay, when are they going to kind of pivot more towards the commercial? There was constantly the question, okay, is the roadmap done in a way that's going to benefit the company instead of the entire ecosystem, and or kind of there might be some things that the company behind it might own proprietary beneficial aspects to kind of push people to go to them, and many of those things, even if not true or maybe exaggerated, it eventually comes out. So having an independent entity that's not really in that part of the business, independent is sometimes kind of very helpful to the image.
So yeah, I think we've seen. I think your point is we've seen this story unfold before with Joyent, which was a company behind that was really funding a lot of the JavaScript stuff, and then we saw a split. Right, there was a fork for JavaScript and io.js, and eventually that came back. But now we have a foundation that really is non-commercial, sort of non-partisan in that sense, right? It's not favoring one company over the other, and people have a seat and they can put their voice in so that they can really kind of focus on the future of the platform. Küster, do you have a contribution?
I have
here?
one more quick example here, more recent one. I think which is part of the unfolding drama, maybe around Redis as well, where there's a lot of these questions are up to that. But Jan.
Also, the thing is, we had this ambassador program,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I'm part of it. Jan is part of it. Alim is part of it, and I mean, it was intended to create all that the Meteor software as a company would not be able to focus on, because their resources, as you already said, are set by this whole commercial surroundings and the situation of Tiny and that they have to obligate to their shareholders now. And the ambassador program was usually with the goal to having this evangelism organically grown out of the community into this whole framework thing, right? And making it I would say a leadership position within the community to grow the community, and then like virally going into that. But it turned out that it didn't work out as planned, and now we're here with the same situation again, that Meteor Software as a company needs to put in resources to develop the software, but also to grow the community. I mean, we are doing that as well, but this is only our part with our limited resources. And this is also something when you have a foundation where this whole community growth can be a totally external thing, where you as a company don't need to focus on anymore.
Well, I think, I think this goes back to the issue of incentives, right? So, I was responsible for, one of the reasons that the letter was held up was I got hired by Meteor with the idea that we would try to implement some of the things that we talked about through Meteor software. And to, Tiny's credit and to Meteor, they gave the effort some runway, and we tried to do this. The problem is that, I think what comes out of this is that the incentives are not really well aligned, because the folks that are true believers like Yumi and Jan, we spend a lot of our own time and effort. And, in a sense, we talk about like when we spend time doing this, we're not getting paid to do something else, right? So we're giving up, there's an opportunity cost for doing this. And not everyone that was in the program or was interested in the program was willing to go down that path. And that's partly because at the end of the day, I think some of the conversations I had was, well, yeah, I do this, but who benefits? Meteor software benefits. I don't really get anything necessarily out of this. And I don't think that's necessarily a fair assessment, but I think it's a reasonable and a rational one for somebody to make, because that's kind of like how it's seen. Like, how do I see the benefit back to myself? And it's very, very hard to do that. If you have a nonpartisan governance organization where you're giving in your contributions, you could say, well, no, that governance organization is not necessarily benefiting in and of itself, right? It's not a commercial entity. There's no profit. And it's meant to give back to all of those in the community. So I think that there is this issue of how do we align incentives with this? To your point also, Küster, there is, and I think I want to push this back to you guys to talk about, is like, we're trying, and I know Meteor Software is trying to keep everything updated, and you release the software, but then there's a whole ecosystem of things that have to be updated in order for it to be useful. And the problem is there is a velocity issue in terms of making sure that all of those other things are maintained and kept up. So we have some bullet points here. Do one of you guys want to talk about them? Which is, because we don't have, this is not Google. We don't have billions of dollars where they could say, let's put tens of millions of dollars and hire people and they're going to do all of these other jobs. They have grown the team, and we do have, a developer advocacy team and a community team, which is great. But at the same time, there is all this other stuff. So why don't we split this up? Küster, why don't we go back? You take the first three items here that we got on that list, and then, let's talk about.
I mean, I could talk about definitely on the item I was putting on the list, because that's the strategy I was
maybe
thinking is.
No, there was a little bit of freeze up, but I don't know if it was me or if it was you guys. So
okay, sorry.
Okay,
okay,
sorry.
so I put on the list that, from daily operations
Yep.
and from administration, you may know the term "no backup, no mercy." So if you have no backup and everything's crashed, or you get a ransomware or something like this, then sorry,
That's
but
the highest risk, right? That's the highest risk. Is
Yeah,
that
that's the highest risk.
Tiny says, let's turn everyeverything off.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
highest risk. But Murphy's law is very strong these days, and if there is the chance that Tiny puts off, or that somebody puts Tiny off, whatever.
Yeah.
The actual reason, I don't want to look into a glass ball or something. It's just we have to consider this as a factor, and if there is no backup, what happens then? I mean, the worst case that could be is that it gets detached from its current governing body, like Meteor software, into a void, because then there is totally chaos, and then it needs to reform again, like and things like this. This is the worst that could happen. So it's much better to beforehand have this strategy, how we transit into something else in case Meteor software is not able to operate anymore on the framework or on the technology. That's
I agree entirely with that. And the thing is, the thing is, one could say that, well, all you have to do is fork the project at some point. But the problem is, it's not just the project, right? It's the IP that's related to it. It's the name of the project, it's the logo, and also Atmosphere is closed source, so you can't fork that. So we really need to have a sense of, like, if we're going to do something, then we need to have an agreement that we're going to do this. Now, when we talk about having a foundation, we're not saying that Meteor software doesn't have a role in it. I think they have a big seat at the governance table, but I think there are reasons, right now there are limits to what it can do. And I won't go into so much how I think, like, the deal was made for Tiny to acquire Meteor. I think we have some evidence that perhaps there wasn't a lot of money that changed hands, and so there's a question, like, as long as Meteor is profitable, they're in good standings. And I think once we get to the point where there is a lot of cost, and that cost might override profit, we may have a risk, especially since it's a portfolio company to a public company, and they answer to their shareholders, and they also answer to government regulators, right? So I think that is a big risk that we talk about here, and so I think that was a good point to bring up. So what are some of the things that these limits are slowing down? Storyteller?
Well, kind of got me there, and just was thinking completely something a bit different than tangent, so I kind of got sidetracked in my
That's
own.
okay. That's okay.
No problem.
I took you on a whirlwind tour for a second there. Yeah.
Let me just jump on top of that, because because they have to answer, I know from what I've seen in Galaxy and from the recent announcements, there is, of course, a diversification in how they make money. And this is like, now you can not only host Meteor apps on Galaxy, you can host something else. And this is a great strategy, because
it's smart.
In the end, you can't rely just only on this one technology and then hope it works out well. But then, and that's the thing, this requires, again, new resources and so on. And then, of course, if they also still have to maintain this one framework while adding other things like this is just putting a lot of pressure to deliver updates, and at the same time blocking the expansion of Galaxy, which is the profitable thing here, right? I mean, it's not Meteor itself, but it's Galaxy that's the core business. And I think if you have less work and less pressure on your side with the technology, and you can more focus on the business side, then this is, of course, also for you as a company, a much more relieving moment, that you can focus on what actually answers, provides money which you have to answer to your shareholder company. And I would also say that paying open source developers is always cheaper than paying full-time developers. I mean, when you pay a full-time developer, then you also have all the extra costs and stuff depending on where you are. In Germany, for example, it would be super super expensive.
Yeah.
To pay someone full-time. You can put like a fifth of the amount on top of that just as a social expenditure. So yeah, that's I think also a very important thing to see here, that this is not destroying the business, but it would also benefit the business of Meteor software.
Yeah. So
I kind of want to jump.
Go ahead.
Jump on that, because that really gets the idea that that paying open source developer is cheaper also presumes that there are other people pitching in. So it's a group effort, which is important from many aspects, as was kind of mentioned. Foundation is not a singular entity effort. It requires many other shareholders or stakeholders, or how you want to call it, to come on in. And with commercial company, there's kind of expectation. Okay, you're making some products or things, so you're kind of expected to maintain everything by yourself. While if you open up a foundation, we are kind of also getting into the open source dynamics and issues around funding and other things in general. But you really need also other companies to come in and they pitch in, but also as a result of that, they get a seat on the table. They get influence about the future of the framework, which they otherwise probably would not have if it's just one singular entity. So that's where this comes in, and in theory that should also help hopefully to finance all the people working on it. But at the same time, there will be, since the foundation itself will become an entity in it on itself, there will be some overheads as well. So there's a lot of work to kind of get through this. So can also want to take, don't expect that foundation is going to happen tomorrow and everything. This is going to take a lot of negotiation and a lot of other paperwork and other work kind of going in. So it's going to take a bit. So, and it will require everybody to go in.
I think that there needs to be a clear sense of what the governance structure looks like. I think I mentioned before that I think one of the goals should always be, like, we don't want to have an organization where there's just so much talk that nothing moves forward. It grinds down and slows. There needs to be a default, bias towards action. So, it's better to build out and to continue doing that, even if there's going to be long-standing debates. We don't want to have something sitting for like 3 years before we can get a release, right? So I think there are these goals that we have to align to and share, and principles that need to be established also in terms of doing this. But one of the things I wanted to kind of point out, and I started saying that, Meteor software is not Google, and it doesn't have a huge slush fund of excess cash, right, sitting around. It is a profitable company. They are doing well, but they also have to answer to a private equity company. And so the thing is, it's like, well, we need additional resources. And things I've seen people complain about is, tutorials being updated, having good examples, code examples of both, the implementations of features in the 2 series as well as the 3 series, right? Prioritization on fixes and workarounds. We try to do the best as an organization. I think Meteor does a really great job trying to do that. But when other companies are sitting there and saying, well, my priority is this, and you're not paying attention to it, and that means money to them, and they don't have the weight to throw into the discussion, then it's really a limited set of people really trying to understand these things. And I just don't think that you get a really great sense of how to curate these fixes and workarounds, these things. Also, better curation of fixes and workarounds, which are things that end up in the forums or in the chats, some of which disappear after they're learned. We need resources that can say, all right, my job is to go in and find these things, aggregate them together, and then put them in a knowledge base that then can be used and serve the rest of the folks here in the future. Again, I've also seen comments on the documentation that there are parts of it that are not as well written or accessible. I think one of the things we've talked about also is, and I think I've talked to Fred about this at point, and they're pretty excited about the idea of having some kind of third-party commercial, a third-party marketplace that third parties can sell packages and tooling and other things that are built upon Meteor or are built into Galaxy, that then would allow a more rich experience for people building applications. And regular meetups, hackathons, annual conference, we had Impact for a while, but that was run by a volunteer, Jan, like for 3 years, right? I think it was 3 full years you did
Yes,
this?
3 years.
Pretty much all by himself. And then there's burnout, right? So that is something that an organization would take on. There would be people assigned to it. Hopefully, you'd rotate through and make sure that would happen. And all of this affects the consistency, timeliness, and of the releases and these additional related features and user confidence at the end of the day. So I'm not saying that I think that I'm not saying at all that Meteor Software is doing a bad job. I think they're doing the best they can with the resources they've got. And they've done a fine job of taking a product that was almost dead in the 2 series and giving it new life by translating the translating to async await from fibers. And I think that they should be commended for that, and we should all be grateful for it. But again, it's one of those things where they can't do everything, and they can't do everything now. And having an organization whose function is to invite and bring those resources together and allow this commercial entity to be able to grow and be viable so that it can contribute back again is one of the things that we're looking towards. So how do we allow everybody to play and have more of a voice? And how do we allow everybody to win? That is the end goal to me.
I think there's one thing, everybody to win also means to me that when you have an organization or a governing body that is able to gather financial resources and spend them in behalf of what benefits everybody, for example, expenses for the conference, then everybody wins, in my opinion. So that is just one example where everybody wins. There are much other examples as well. I just think, look, currently I get money from sponsors for my open source work. And I'm willing to repay that money, but this money also goes into, I don't know, I have to buy a new laptop this year or at latest next year, for example. Last week, I crashed my phone. So currently, I'm totally off the grid here, by the way.
Oh.
So I have to buy a new phone. So because this is my private thing, I'm personally prioritizing my expenses towards what's pressuring the most. But a governing body that is only around there for this technology can use these resources. So it always, with always the rule in mind, it has to benefit for the entire community. And then this is awesome, because then everybody wins when we have a great conference, when we have great tutorials, when we have, it's also for us important. It's not always thinking about newcomers. Every one of us uses the documentation regularly, because you can't keep everything on your mind over time, over changes, over new releases, how exactly which function behaves. So we also need a great documentation over time. And then if that if that foundation or whatever organization can spend money on these resources, which pressuring most currently, then everybody wins.
By the way, that's something that we didn't really talk about too much. The idea of like raising money, right?
Yep.
A foundation is a great structure in order to do that. If Meteor as software said, hey, why don't you guys, we have a project we want to do. Why don't you guys, contribute? We're trying to raise $100,000 towards it. I think most folks would say, well, you're a private company. We don't really like the idea of giving you that money just, because it's a goodwill gesture and you're going to put it back into the software. But, foundations raise money in this way. They go to corporations. They say, hey, sponsor this project. We're looking for like a $300,000 contribution. We're looking for $50,000 contribution.
Wow.
And it's not, I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's the ability to raise money that way is more natural to an organization like a foundation than a for-profit company.
Yeah.
And
plus, also it can be tax deductible.
That's right. Yeah. So there are incentives, right, to doing it that way. Exactly. For the companies that might want to give that. And of course, they look good, right? It's like I'm doing something back to the community, and it's like whatever. But I think all of those things are part and parcel of the ideas behind why we need some kind of governance structure. We want to share the responsibility. We want to make sure that the folks that are willing to contribute don't feel like they're being exploited. And we hear that from time to time, even though I know that's not true, but we want the people that are using the software benefiting from it to, we want to reduce the free rider. The free rider concept is that, other people do work and you get a free ride, you get to use it for nothing. And that happens a lot. But if we have this other organization, nobody could say, well, I'm waiting for Meteor software to get this done, because Meteor software is not going to be there, at your beck and call, just doing this. It's going to be that if you want this done, and if you really think it's valuable, come on board, join the foundation, have a seat at the table, but it's also going to cost you something in order to do that. So we reduce the free rider problem. We'll never eliminate it altogether. There's always going to be somebody who's going to use the software for free and is not going to contribute back at all in any way. You can't get rid of that. That's just the nature of free open source software. But what you can do is you can reduce the burden to any one company. And by the way, the other risk too that I have to say, and I don't think it's intended, right? But we did see that MDG, when they started working with GraphQL, which was supposed to be data layer 2 of Meteor, and it turned out that it was more profitable for them to do work with Apollo, they effectively abandoned Meteor to just do most of their work there. And they have a profit motive, and they have people that they had to respond to, and they had raised a lot of money. And although none of us liked it, I understand the business incentives. And I think that, as good-hearted and as well-intentioned as the folks at Meteor Software are today, when business demands you do something, you do it. And it may mean that, that you can't focus the way you did before on the other thing that you care about, because you need to do this to stay alive and to keep moving, right? And so I think that's what we want to de-risk at the end of the day. And I want Meteor Software to be successful. I want them to grow. I want them to be around, because I know that, they're good people there, and it's a good company. I think Galaxy is a good product, and Galaxy is built on Meteor, and they contribute heavily to Meteor. So, I'm not saying that I don't want them involved in Meteor at all. I want them involved, but I also want them not to be so stuck in Meteor that they can't grow as a company, right? I want them to be able to say, okay, where we're going to get our revenue, and how can we do this in things that are adjacent to Meteor? And that's what they're pursuing right now. And I think that's a really good strategy. I think it's the proper strategy for them. But I also think that we need to start thinking about, like, how do we ensure that Meteor continues to evolve and grow, and it doesn't like hit a 2 or 3 year stagnation because there is this confusion about who is in charge of moving it forward and whether or not it's a priority.
Can I just jump in on that? Because
Yeah.
I know we need to move on, but there's one very key factor here we also forgot to mention beforehand, and that is trust. And trust was in the past a very big issue with Meteor due to that move.
Yeah.
You know, there was this FOD situation, very like everybody saying Meteor is dead. Oh my God, and just we're just jumping off. And I personally have increasing trust issues with certain technologies where companies behind are it. And sorry, Jan, but React is on number 1 on that list.
Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah, which is why I am totally switching on the Vue side of things when I'm not working with Meteor. I'm still loving Blaze, but I'm really in my other projects. I'm totally switching to Vue, and which is also independent. And so I think this kind of trust issue will always remain as long as we have this situation from the past pushing into the history of Meteor a little bit. And the foundation could be at least one measure to reduce that trust issue, at least when talking about the older section of Meteor users.
Yeah.
I want to segue on this kind of still related to this, trust. And I would kind of more like on the leadership aspect and more on the community side, because right now we are a relatively loose and ungoverned community formation, and that just is not feasible to manage this large project. Not like even like you're barely managing to keep our heads above the water with the community packages. Just like earlier today, I had someone emailing me about doing some more releases and merging specific PR. So it's very demanding. It is chaotic, unfocused, because we are just like jumping from one package to the other, trying to get everything there. So that's like another thing that then the foundation you could say focuses more onto and kind of gives more structure. So I think no matter what, we need to kind of reorganize at the very least Meteor community packages into something that would be more workable in that aspect. Okay.
Sorry, I had my Alexa talking in the background. I should really turn the volume down on that. It seems every episode I end up having that thing talking. But I agree. I think you're absolutely right. There is chaos and unfocus. The other thing too is like succession. Like if with this unstructured process, how do we ensure that when somebody says, you know what, I want to step back, that there's somebody to fill in? We don't have any kind of structure that allows for that, or allows us to figure out how do we do a selection, right? How do we pass work on? It's very informal, and that can work, but as things grow, it just won't scale. And I think getting something in and being able to talk internally. And I think, by the way, Jan, you've also had in the past, I believe, put forums together or channels together on Slack, asking people to come in and talk about this in an informal way, and that hasn't happened. So it's one of those things I think doesn't get thought about too much or talked about, but it's super important for ensuring the continuance and future of a project like this. So anyway, I mean, these are our opinions. Is there anything that left out in terms of opinions here? If we haven't, I just want to invite anybody who's on the Slack right now to throw in their 2 cents. By the way, Jan, you have a fan here. You've got Patrick saying he agrees with what you're saying.
Well, which Jan?
Which
It doesn't matter. I think you know, I think he's agreeing. If he agrees with one, he probably agrees with both. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But Patrick, if you want to disambiguate which Jan you're talking about, go ahead. If you're like on board with both of them, that's awesome too. So thank you all there. Let's see what we've got here. Yeah. So folks, we have the letter. Did we publish that link to the letter yet?
Not in the chat, but
Okay,
it's available in the forums in my announcement. Together, somebody else then posted about, and I know that person's names, but he has not come publicly with it, so I will not say it. But he has a cool nickname as well. Let me just quickly get there if my everything goes. Yeah, so Digital Extremist posted
Digital Extremist.
Yeah, he is a very interesting person. Have very much fun communicating with him. But he also posted a link to my my review as well. Mm-hmm. And earlier in there there is in the forums or in the thread there is the letter linked as well. Yeah. And if you go through that link, you will have the options to comment and also request additions. So if you want to sign up or your company in there, make that suggested edit, and we'll be happy to add you.
So Küster just sent in our private chat that he's going to put the link to the document also in the description, in the YouTube description for the program. So if you go back over to the channel, or you go over there and you go into the description area, you will find that at some point, maybe later today. Küster?
If you like, you could also type that very long link down there. By
okay.
And sometimes you just need a meditating experience.
And here is the forums link that that Jan just talked about before, Storyteller, that is. And let me just drop this into the comments, and the folks can get it over there also. Oh, and Patrick, you're one of our favorite people now. He's being very kind and very thoughtful and very complimentary. So very much appreciated. We do this for you guys. We want to make sure that that we try to add as much value as possible. And we want to start this conversation. Do you feel that there is a need for a foundation? Do you think, as we do, that we need to think about, you know, how Meteor can grow safely with a lot of confidence and trust that it is being governed and it is being developed and maintained for you, the end developer, the end user, the business that relies on it. And that's what we're focused on. This is not a power thing. This is not, you know, trying to size up and say we want to seize control. That's none of that, right? This is really about, like, how do we make sure that if you choose to use Meteor 5 years down the road, you're not saying, God, I wish I had picked something else, because, you know, the company behind it has moved in a different direction. And the thing is, we can only look to history to kind of get a sense of what it is. And it's not just on this project that this has happened. There are other projects out there where you've seen things fork. And so we're trying to get ahead of the game here. All right. We think this is a good point to do so. So guys, I'm going to leave it up to you to add to before we move to signing off for the week.
Yep.
All right. Well, listen, folks, thank you for joining us this week. What are we doing next week? Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about some things that are coming up. So next week, we're going to be talking about how signals compare with trackers. Following week after that, we'll be talking about multilingual applications. And then about 3 weeks from now, we're going to be going over the MeteorJS roadmap and giving you a better understanding of what's on it. And we hope to have some folks from Meteor here to kind of go through and explain why they believe that these are the things that we need to focus on, why these have to be priorities. And then we're going to be talking about scaling your engineering practice and supporting. I can't read the rest of that. And in early December, we're going to have an exciting talk about ARM-based DIY computers running Meteor. And that is near and dear to Küster's heart. And we're hoping to see something exciting there. So we're looking forward to some really interesting programs going forward. If you guys have some ideas for us in terms of topics that we should do, again, put them in the comments. Let us know. All right. And with that, I'm going to say, have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you again next week.
Cheers.
Have a great weekend.